Pro-constructive speech starts now. We affirm and advocate for an untraditional solution to poverty. Welfare programs in the form of asset-based social welfare, which will relocate the poor from rural to urban China. Our model is two-sided. First, we move people from rural areas to urban areas by providing them with an apartment. Poon 19 of Bloomberg writes that vacant units make up more than 1/5 of China's entire urban housing stock. The State Grid Corporation of China quantifies this into 64 million empty homes. 20% of China's urban housing is empty. On our side, we distribute these houses to the poor. This helps every person in poverty. As according to the Chinese government, 16.6 million people in the form of 5.5 million families in poverty only require 8.6% of the 64 million homes. Second, we do so cheaply. Bloomberg 2019 states that these apartments, by law, must be sold above a certain price. Therefore, assuming similar costs to the first relocation, which was, according to Poe & Poe, resettling 6.8 million with a cost of 5.7 billion, i.e. $840 per person relocated, a conservative estimate for relocating everyone in poverty would be $14 billion. The Chinese government, with a budget of $3.4 trillion, could resettle everyone in poverty in 1 year with only 0.4% of its budget at worst. Thus, our sole contention is providing housing through asset-based welfare will eradicate poverty. The NDRC, a Chinese government organization, found through data extrapolated from a 2020 study about China's relocation of 9.5 million people in the past, that out of all the households, 89% of households with people able to work found work. We can see that finding a job is a causal effect of relocation because jobs are the only way to maintain self-sustenance. Furthermore, this is a permanent solution for poverty. Bastion 15 of Shelter Force explains, to build communities where low-income people can thrive, we must acknowledge that income is how you get out of poverty. Assets are how you stay out. Assets and ownership are fundamental to economic opportunity and mobility. A child with a savings account in their name is 4.5 times more likely to complete college than a child without one. Logically, this makes sense. If you lose your only source of income, you have a high chance of re-entering poverty. But if you own your house, your car, and ways to sustain your life, you'll stay out of poverty. Lastly, this is the only fundamental solution to poverty. As long as we continue to have people in poor areas, there will always be poor people. Brickell 15 of IFC explains that urbanization is the most powerful mechanism to fight poverty because cities have a competitive advantage over rural areas to move the people out of poverty, justifying why Hoffman 14 of the World Bank finds that only 3% of China's urban population live in poverty. Only urbanization can truly ever eradicate poverty in the long run. Why then should we increase spending on welfare specifically, as our proposal would require housing? It is because if we increase spending on infrastructure, we will have more homes. But realize there's already a massive surplus, which is what ISAC 20 quantifies as massive as 50 ghost cities. This is why we should increase spending on welfare so China can resettle more and give the relocated a better career and safety net. Indeed, Weller 15 of Business Insider finds that China has plans to resettle 250 million people by 2026, not build more homes. On top of directly alleviating poverty, we also indirectly alleviate poverty through economic growth initiated by the resettlement. First, observe that a 1% increase in GDP decreases poverty as a whole by 1.7%. That's The Economist 13. Asset-based welfare will help the economy for two reasons. First is the creation of new economies. McMahon, a former Wall Street journalist based in China, found that the relocation of rural Chinese citizens into ghost cities stimulates the economy of ghost cities overnight, writing that when a factory employed 200,000 in Zhengzhou, the economy jump-started overnight. Second, I think it's fair to say that China is known for its cheap products. They do this by, according to Industry Week, maintaining a low labor cost, sometimes as low as 20% of the overall cost. For comparison, America is 70%. Thus, it is not a stretch to say that an increase in cheap labor will cause a decrease in this price again. 40% of China's GDP comes from exports. This will greatly boost the economy. China already has enough houses. It is time that we started through, as the Chinese government defines as welfare, give it to the poor and those in need. The Chinese government already planned to relocate 250 million people. We simply say, don't stand in the way. We are very proud to affirm. Thank you.
Okay, Kansai.
Is everyone ready? My constructive speech starts now. So we negate definition. According to Law Insider, public infrastructure refers to publicly owned physical infrastructure in the state, which means that PI can be provided by either government or private companies. However, welfare programs can only be provided by the government as defined by Investopedia. Framework. We weigh effectiveness in this debate by comparing the number of people being lifted out of poverty and the amount of money that effectively goes to poverty alleviation. Contention one. Benefits from transportation. Their entire case does not stand because transportation, public infrastructure is the prerequisite of all resettlement. That's why you should should vote for Con. According to statistics from 2019, approximately 5.5 million people in rural areas of China were living below the poverty line because rural areas are usually remote and excluded from public resources. Public infrastructure solves by connecting them to urban cities, thus allowing resources to flow in and migrant workers to flow out, lifting rural areas out of poverty in either way. For example, People's Daily 20 writes that a new high-speed road network built in Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region has improved local transportation conditions and has cut travel time to nearby cities by 16 hours. New York Times 15 writes that transportation is essential to escaping poverty. Studies show that the group of people with the least access to efficient transportation has the highest unemployment rate and the lowest income. Now we can see that transportation is essential to poverty alleviation. Subpoint A, benefits to rural areas. By making transportation much easier, new business opportunities have been introduced to remote cities, thus improving the local economy. Bangkok Post 19 reports that by building high-speed roads or just new roads, the Chinese government has reduced poverty rate by 7% in a high tribe community in southern China. And after the high-speed train linking Shanghai in Yunnan province started operating in 2016, has generated 150 billion yuan in the GDP of Yunnan. Subpoint B, remittance. There are nearly 300 million migrant workers in China who move to larger cities where they not only found more job opportunities, but also earn enough money to help their families back in rural areas. ResearchGate 2008 writes that in total, migrant workers remit 340 billion yuan to their families, which represents about 18% of the total rural income. Importantly, migration increases household income per capita by 13.1%, and migrant remittances are both significant and responsive to the needs of household members. On average, migrant workers remit 3,000 to 4,000 RMB annually to their family members in rural areas, while research shows that families can be lifted out of poverty by merely 3,500 RMB, which means that the average amount of money being remitted are adequate to alleviate poverty. According to IOM Migration Research Series 2007, remittance reduced the poverty incidence of family members by 18%. And remember, just all these benefits can only be achieved by public infrastructure, by building more high-speed roads, by transportation. Contention 2, social welfare ineffective. Harvard 15 writes that there's no evidence that welfare significantly decreased the poverty rate in target groups of non-citizens. So because there's lack of oversight, increased spending welfare will only make more money evaporate into waste. Subpoint A, DBAL. Asia Media Center 20 finds that 42% of eligible urban families were not receiving the DBAL, which is a form of Chinese social welfare guaranteeing the minimum income of the poor. And in fact, 86% of the DBAL recipients are actually ineligible, taking resources away from those who are in desperate need of help. Basic Income 16 writes that for every 10 yuan spent on DBAL, only 1 yuan reaches individuals in poverty. The other 90% of welfare either goes to the pockets of local governments or just simply evaporates through the long procedure and transfer of DBAL. Subpoint B, pension fraud. 618 writes that under the Chinese government's pension system, an eligible individual must prove that they're still alive in order to access their welfare money. This is inconvenient for many elderlies who have to take long and expensive trips just to prove that they're alive and just to get to their place of registration and update their pension documents. Yet these complicated procedures still cannot prevent fraudsters from receiving pensions on behalf of their dead family members. In April 2018, the city of Zhengzhou in central Henan province launched a 2-week campaign targeting those fraudsters and eventually identified 12,000 fraudsters from whom they recovered a combined 12.3 million yuan. So based on these two contentions, we urge a combat, and we are proud to oppose the resolution. Thank you. We call for running prep.
Do you need any prep?
We call for running prep. You can stop the timer, host. You can ask the first question.
Yes. Okay. Time starts now. Just yes or no answer, please. Do you agree that urban areas have better employment and better access to infrastructure?
Yeah, we agree. That's why we need transportation and to build more public
You
infrastructure,
may
which
have
is the
the question.
prerequisite for case. Right. My question for you is: in your case, you said that 86% of people who were settled in urban cities were able to find jobs. However,
Sorry,
what's their average income? Are their income able to lift themselves out of poverty?
Yes.
Because
yes.
What's the
Yes,
average
yes.
income? What's the average income?
You can have this. Sorry, I don't have the specific number right now. You can card us on that later, but I don't think this is crosses the time of this.
Could you please just send us the card after crossfire saying that their income is adequate to lift themselves out of poverty?
Okay. So you talked about remittance, right? Like workers in urban areas earning money and sending it back. Wouldn't it be more effective if people were just to relocate to urban areas instead?
No, because not all people can move to urban cities. For example, elderlies, they can endure long journeys. Well, only migrant workers can move to urban cities and then remit 340 billion yuan back to their home annually, lifting.
Understood.
Yeah.
Quick follow-up clarification then. In this case, we brought up in our case, right? You heard that. These people have access to these go cities, right? It's possible to relocate them. So what's the thing hindering them in this case?
So how do you mean that all migrant workers, all people in rural areas can access gold cities, even those provinces without high-speed rails to set them out of rural areas?
Response, my partner will deal with that in rebuttal, but I'm just saying, do you agree that it's more effective if all these people have access to like better education, better healthcare?
We don't agree that they all. We don't. No, we don't agree.
Have access to education?
Can you let me finish my answer? We don't agree that it will be more effective to move all people in rural areas to urban cities. We think it's more effective to allow people to choose whether they want to go to urban cities or not. That's why we're putting high-speed rails and allowing them to go to urban cities and send remittances back to their homes. But
one last follow-up.
Can I ask a question now?
Okay, you may have a question. Yes.
My question for you is, how do you make sure that everyone will be willing to move to urban cities if you like, for example, many people are not willing to if they think that living rural areas are like suitable, or they just don't want to go to urban cities?
Well, in this case, then what happens is they still have people who are willing to move to urban cities. Thus, that stimulates the economy, as we pointed out in our contention. That stimulates the economy, as we pointed out in contention. And a rising tide lifts all ships, and the people will also be brought out of poverty. Now, let's move back to the point of high-speed transportation.
You have asked me a follow-up question.
Okay, you may have a follow-up. Okay, you may have a follow-up.
Sure. So even if you don't care about those people who are unwilling to move to urban cities, how do you settle people if you don't even have high-speed rails? If you don't have roads leading to urban cities?
Sorry, we do have roads leading to urban cities, and the key point here is that the resolution calls for increased spending, right? Increased spending in like transportation is not necessary. My partner will bring up that why later. But the point of this is that even if you have these high-speed roads, these people in poverty still cannot have access unless you go through welfare. Thank you. That's the end of it.
They can. Yeah.
Okay, rebuttal speech.
As a brief roadmap, I will go down their case and I will signpost. All right, there's an overview. All right, start. Now, the thesis of our case is if you don't have access to welfare, you don't have access to infrastructure. This directly counters our first contention, which I'm going to deal with now. We have several responses. The first is to transportation as a whole. This actually specifically deals with roads as an example, because according to Liu et al. In 2020, 99.6% of rural China is already covered by road. Increased spending is not necessary because current spending is already going to solve. But the second overall response is to this idea on high-speed rail, because here's the thing. A high-speed rail ticket is not affordable to people who are in poverty. If you're in poverty, yes, sure, infrastructure existing might be a good thing for you, but you can't have access to this infrastructure unless the government's going to pay for you, like subsidize your ticket. As a result, welfare is actually the prerequisite to access this infrastructure. So yes, sure, increased spending on infrastructure might be necessary, but the next step in actually alleviating poverty, and the most important step, because without it you can't alleviate poverty, is increasing spending on welfare. That is dealing with their first contention. Let's deal with more of their subpoints specifically. So first, they give you this idea on rural areas and how they're going to decrease poverty by 7%. First, we decrease poverty by 100%. We think this outweighs on scope. But second of all, they talk to us about like local economy and how it's going to grow the local economy. And this actually links into their second point, where there's an increase in income by 13.1%. We just say that if you're in poverty, 13.1% is not a lot of money. Let's say I earn $1,000. $131 is not going to make a difference in my life. If I'm in poverty, an increase in income needs to be significant in order for this impact to be weighable in this debate. So let's link this into their terminal impact of decreasing poverty by 18%. Here's the thing, I actually wanted to card this earlier, but I didn't. But the thing about alleviating poverty by 18% is, again, first of all, we are decreasing poverty by 100%, so we outweigh on scope. But second of all, this thing about alleviating poverty by 18%, we literally solve the root cause by moving people to urban areas. By moving people to urban areas, there's literally no chance of poverty coming back in the future. So let's go to their second contention. First, their second contention is basically like a bunch of disadvantages about welfare programs. First, they talk about the DBOW program. We say, yes, there are some flaws in welfare programs, but at the same time, we aren't supporting these welfare programs. So because like these impacts aren't exactly big, we are saying that our impact's bigger. So we think that these welfare program disadvantages aren't necessarily that important in this debate. So, but let's deal with them specifically anyway. So the DBOW program, it's like the DBOW program is the problem with the DBOW program is that we're not supporting the DBOW program. So this DBOW disadvantage, you can throw this out the window. And then on pension fraud, 12.3 million yuan. I think comparing money to people in poverty and saving people from poverty is, well, it's our impact is far bigger, because the fact that the fact that we can lift 16.6 million people out of poverty, for if we're going to look at their impact for an example here, at a cost of less than 1 yuan per person in this case, I think that's a pretty good impact. So yes, 12.3 million yuan is a lot. 16.6 million people out of poverty is a lot bigger. So let's go to our case, because our case is significant in this matter. What happens on our side? First, we migrate 16.6 million people to urban areas. That's to say, we literally give these people homes, and these people are no longer going to be in poverty, because this actually links into the question they asked. According to Statista, the average migrant worker in China earns 4,000 yuan per month. 4,000 yuan, I don't know how many dollars that is, but that is a significant amount of money, enough to lift you out of poverty, because the poverty line in China is like $1.90 a day. The fact of the matter is, when people move to urban areas, they are able to find higher paying jobs that lift them out above the poverty line, because the fact of the matter is urban areas pay far more than rural areas. That's just undeniable, because the economies are far bigger in these areas. But ultimately, what do you get on our side that you don't get on their side? First, you solve the root cause of poverty, because urbanization prevents poverty from coming back in the future. That is why there's only 3% poverty in urban areas. Why is this true? Because in urban areas, there are resources that make sure that people don't re-enter poverty. Well, this could look like welfare programs, but at the same time, it could also look like infrastructure that already exists that you can only access with welfare programs that move you to the urban areas to begin with. For example, education. In the long term, education will prevent you from falling back into poverty, because it teaches you the skills and gives you access to high-paying jobs. Without welfare, you can't access this infrastructure. Without welfare, you're stuck in poverty. We are very proud to propose.
Okay.
Before my rebuttals or my prep time starts, can I please call for 2 pieces of cards? First is 16.6 million people are lifted out of poverty, which
That's an
is what
analytic. That's basically our impact,
And-
because I mean, you can have this.
Okay, but do you have a card about that, or is that just your own like assumption?
Our card is our analysis that we are lifting everyone out of poverty. So 16.6 million is a number of poverty, a number in poverty right now.
So just give that part of poverty. So
yeah,
the
sure.
part of poverty.
And also, can I also call for the card saying that the average income after they move to cities is $4,000? I believe that is also what you said in
4,000
your
yuan.
report. Oh, sorry, yeah, 4,000 yuan.
Okay, so the other card, it's in the package somewhere, so it might be best if you look in there.
Okay, so the 1 minute time should start now. The 1 minute time for looking for evidence should start now.
Okay, this is the quote for 4,000 yuan. It's not our prep time, I don't think. It's 1 minute and then our prep time. And then the other one is.
Oh yeah, can the host please stop their prep?
Yeah, that's.
I'll copy it out of the packet.
Yeah, you can reset. You can reset afterward. But yeah.
Oh, sure. And the other one is on this one. Only the first part's important. Okay, those are the 2. So that was 24 seconds, but it's not our prep.
Okay, Judge can reset the pro prep and then start the con prep.
Yeah, pro prep should be reset. Pro prep should be reset.
Con prep?
They're
please.
using prep team to read the card.
Wait, can you please start con prep? Thank you. Okay, you can stop the prep. So is anyone not ready for rebuttal? Just a second. Okay, So my time starts now. They're so contentious about resettlement. 10 responses. First of all, Judge, we need the infrastructure in the first place before we can ever have resettlement programs. Why? Because you can't simply fly these rural migrants to the urban cities, right? You need transportation in the first place. And also you talk about how like, there's already roads, but that doesn't make sense because how are you going to transport them from the rural areas and like from rural areas to urban areas when there are only these roads without cars, right? It simply doesn't make sense. They don't provide any evidence saying that they can be transported easily without simply using welfare. And also, we actually provide evidence saying that welfare is actually good because welfare is actually solving the problem because infrastructure is actually solving the problem because infrastructure actually increases the number of transportation, and that is the key to solving resettlement. And also, this is not unique on both sides because, Judge, the concept can also propose migration as well. Migration through transportation. We already give you evidence about 18% poverty reduction because of remittances. We clearly see that the impacts of this is more effective than our opponents. Because why? Because our benefits are not from like the government spending or simply building the roads. We're not giving them money anymore. We're not giving them housing. We're simply letting themselves pull themselves out of poverty. Okay. And the second response is that they say that they can move the entire population. That doesn't make sense. It's very illogical because when the entire population from the rural areas has moved to urban areas, at least the rural land barren and unpopulated. Which means like 100% population is even not even possible. When the urban city becomes too populated, they have to move to rural areas, and these rural areas, since is very unpopulated, they have to actually build rural areas again, and that just costs even more. And three, there are already empty houses that they can be distributed to the poor as they already say in their contention and in their case. So therefore, there's no reason to increase spending. Okay, Judge, even if they say that houses are not enough, then you have to build houses, which is infrastructure and is not welfare anymore. Only the welfare is the process of giving these houses to the poor workers at a cheaper price, but not building the houses themselves. Therefore, you need to increase spending in infrastructure before you can do anything else. Moving on to the fourth response is that it actually increases the cost of living. We actually give an example of commercial 2018 says that the average resettlement household lives in a more urbanized environment in which the cost of living is increased. Now, Judge, remember that even though they say that like the jobs pay more in urban areas than rural areas, that doesn't matter because the cost of living is higher as well. They cannot prove like the percentage is higher. They cannot prove they cannot prove a ratio. Therefore, they don't access this impact. And fifth, remember that the jobs are bad. Even though they say like $4,000, that doesn't make sense because that's not the average income, right? That's not the average income of a resettler. That's only a migrant worker. Remember, Judge, a migrant worker could also be a person who goes there simply by transportation, which actually gives their impact to our side. They also tell you that resettlement programs actually lead to jobs in Sweatshop, which is very low paying and has a very poor working environment. The commercial 2018 reports that the low value of rural human capital relative to its urban counterpart has led to exploitation by employers who hire them under sweatshop conditions, meaning that it actually harms the poor instead of gives benefits to them. The sixth response is that actually we're actually increasing the debt of the cities, of the ghost cities. Commercial Long 2018 says that cities that has ballooned to almost 250% of its budget after they moved settlers to other places in ghost towns, which is why actually it harms the poor when the debt increases and the debt amounts to a huge amount. Moving on to the seventh response is that it is actually inefficient because the costs are too high. The resettlement programs cost 940 billion RMB just to move a small amount of money. Remember, Josh, we're not simply talking about poverty alleviation. We're talking about the effectiveness of poverty alleviation. They can't simply say, okay, we'll alleviate poverty, but they spend too much on it. Therefore, it's not effective. And the eighth response is that they cannot access hukou. One to this 2007 report said a huge reason why migrants remain in poverty is because lack of hukou access, lack of welfare access, including social security and pensions. However, the only when the person has a local hukou can access welfare benefits. But welfare does not give them hukou. Hukou is welfare reform, not welfare increased spending, which is why we urge a pro ballot.
Fine.
Thank you so much. Okay, Crossfire, is anyone not ready?
All right, 1 second. 3 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Our time starts now. You can have the first question.
What is the scope of the sweatshop argument?
What is the scope? Okay, so currently, like the scope is based on, since it's the evidence is from 2008, meaning that the scope is from currently resettled people.
Wait,
Up
does
till
your card
2008.
specifically indicate a specific number of people who are affected, or is that just your analysis?
That's the card. The card simply says that the
Can you
value
quote
of
your
rural
card?
human capital. Okay, I'm just going to read from my card. The
right.
low value of rural human capital relative to its urban counterpart has led to exploitation by employers who hire them under sweatshop conditions. So that's the
Right, I got
quotation.
that part,
I'm
but
just
how
going- I'm
many
just going
people are
to,
being
I-
exploited?
there's no like specific number on this card. Can I just
So we
ask my
can't weigh
question
it.
now? Can I
Okay,
just
go
ask my
ahead,
question now? Okay, so what is the average cost of a railway ticket, high-speed railway ticket?
A railway ticket,
status
I mean, it depends on where you're going. Like,
Yeah, but like, what is the average cost, for example, for in your plan? Let's just say in your resettlement plan, what is the average cost of a high-speed railway ticket from an
I
urban
think
from a
to be
rural area
fair,
to an
it would
urban
be
area?
better to respond to this with the average cost to resettle a person, because that includes all the fees. The average cost
Really?
is
Because
$840 per person.
800. Then what is the okay? Let's just say what is the average cost of like high-speed railway tickets? Is it larger than that, or is
Do you
it
want to tell
smaller?
me? Because I have no idea how expensive train tickets are. I just know that they're not cheap.
Okay, so you can't prove that they cannot afford railway tickets. Railway
No,
tickets
I'm
by
just
themselves.
saying
Okay,
that
let's
they're
just move
more
on. Do you
expensive than
do
the
you have a
cheaper.
question?
Okay,
you
you
have a
said
question?
high-speed rail. You can have. You
Oh,
just asked
sorry.
me a question. I'll just ask you another question. So,
Oh, you did ask me a question. Oh, then it's my question, right? Okay,
didn't you
sure.
just ask?
So you're
Whatever,
saying
go
that you're
ahead.
saying that in response to our contention to subpoint A about like they're not supporting, so you're not supporting deval, therefore you don't have to defend it. But what about the 50? Okay, so currently 53 million people are receiving deval in a status quo. How are you going to solve that problem with when the deval itself is being like misallocated and mistargeted? Because it's still kind of welfare,
We're just
right?
supporting a different welfare program. We're supporting a different
Okay,
branch of the same tree.
remember, what is the topic? Does the topic say resettlement program in particular?
No,
Or does
it
it say
says that.
welfare program?
Okay, I'm going to explain this, and I don't want you to interrupt me
Sure.
because I know you're going to interrupt me as soon as I say it. So, increased spending on welfare programs means increased spending as a whole, not necessarily as a whole, but what it means is increased spending. Like looking at the increased spending, we are also increasing spending because we're increasing spending on one welfare program. So on net, we're still increasing spending on all welfare programs.
Okay, but do you
And
only
actually,
create? Okay, are you saying that you should only increase spending in one particular welfare
No,
program?
we're saying that if we need increased spending on
Isn't
other
that what you
programs,
just
we
said? Okay, let's
could,
just move
but, like,
on. We spent
we're
too much time
focusing
on
on
this.
the
Do you have a question?
resettlement program.
Do you
Okay,
have a question?
so
Mhm.
I guess you had like 10 responses. Let's see.
Do you
So
have
the
any
debt.
questions
How
about
does the
any of
debt
them?
specifically harm poor people?
Okay, because when the debt comes to the government, they will provide less or like less welfare services, right? Because the
How
welfare services
much
come from the
less?
we
Alright,
don't have the
time's up.
specific amount, but we do have the evidence about the debt increasing. Okay, thank you.
All right, so there's no internal link.
Wait, I'll call some prep. Running prep, please. Okay, that's time. Thank you. 3 minutes. I'm gonna do a quick off-time roadmap. I'm gonna go quick overview. I'm gonna quickly run down the rebuttals and then do extensions. All right, everybody ready? Summary speech starts. Now, let's address this entire topic, right? We tell you that our side is a prerequisite to any and all impacts they have. The only way to access any of the impacts they mention and to gain the impacts we mention is to go through welfare, because without welfare, all impacts they mention are completely inaccessible. Now, let's go through why, right? First of all, they talk about transportation, how transportation is necessary for our impacts. However, we tell you the roads are already built. They even conceded to this in their rebuttal. They said there are already highways built to connect these places, but you need cars. However, what they fail to realize is that the cars are provided through welfare programs. They are provided by us, by our side, by the proposition, because we are the ones who are giving them the money, the resources, and the necessary means to travel on these already existing roads that they have already conceded exist in order to reach these cities that we talk about. Now, furthermore, they have not responded to any of our, they have not responded directly to our contention that these ghost cities exist, which means you must take it as acknowledgement that these exist. And right now, what we need to do is relocate people into these cities and help them thrive and earn better, have better wages. Therefore, we tell you that we are the prerequisite to any transportation transportation impacts and relocation impacts in this debate. Now, their second response is essentially they have to build more homes. However, this simply means that they do not listen to our constructive speech at all. We've told you there are already 64 million homes in China that are in urban areas that are uninhabited. We tell you that building new homes is completely useless and unnecessary. We tell you what we need to do right now is give them welfare, give them the means to go to these homes, go to places with higher pay, higher access to education, and higher access to healthcare, both of which have gone unresponded. Next, they talk about how jobs are bad in urban areas, right? They say there's jobs in sweatshops. We tell you this is simply unquantified, right? They do not quantify how much the earnings are. They don't quantify how many people are in sweatshops. However, we give you a specific number, over 4,000 yuan in earnings. We tell you this is a huge number compared to what they currently have. This is the biggest and best way we have to alleviate poverty in the status quo, given the circumstances we are in right now. Lastly, they talk about accumulated debt. We tell you we've told you in our constructive speech, that's only 0.4% of the government budget. 0.4%. Even if you say, well, the debt is bad, 0.4% isn't going to do anything. In fact, with such a minimum spending and alleviating so much poverty, 16.6 million people alleviating poverty for this many people, they're simply weighing minimum money against maximum lives. Lastly, to talk about the hukou system. Simple response: it has been abolished. The hukou system has been abolished. Joe 17 tells you China is already abolishing the hukou system. Now, let's move on to key reasons why we win this debate, right? Key clash extensions. We tell you that we win because our impacts are simply greater. We have higher scope and higher magnitude. We are alleviating poverty, saving lives for 16.6 million people. They give you no quantified impacts, no quantified evidence, no explanations on any of their sources. We tell you that transportation exists, that homes exist, that all we need to do is give them the means to access this good infrastructure, this good income, and this good life. They are simply weighing money against lives and minimum money against maximum lives at that. We tell you we are prerequisite, we have greater scope, greater magnitude, and you must vote pro ballot. Thank you.
Running prep, thanks.
Host, you can stop the timer. Right, so my summary speech starts now. First question is and that is about ghost cities. Judge, we never said we need to build more houses, and that's why their ghost cities asserted instead. And also, they are suggesting that we need to rebuild ghost cities and spend even more money into developing ghost cities, and that's why they're leaving poverty ineffectively. The second clash is about hukou. We tell that many migrant workers in urban cities are suffering and regret going to urban cities because they lack insurance coverage due to the hukou policy. And a protest cannot solve this problem by increasing spending welfare, because this is a welfare reform, but not welfare, but not welfare underfunding. The third clash is about urbanization. First of all, we tell that we should. We shouldn't resettle everyone, because we should merely provide migrant workers with chances to go to urban cities, but we shouldn't resettle everyone. We shouldn't move every single person from rural areas to urban cities, because many people aren't willing to go to urban cities. Second of all, we tell that there are opponents aim at abandoning all rural areas. However, we tell that introducing business opportunities into rural areas can also benefit the economy more effectively. People's Daily 20 reports that high-speed railways in Guangxi also contribute to poverty alleviation through the development of tourism. The autonomous region has established trackless high-speed rail stations in 16 counties, introducing 240,000 buses, bringing about 2.2 million tourists, generating increasing GDP in rural areas. Third of all, we tell that roads and transportation is a prerequisite of urbanization. They said that 96% of provinces have roads. That's why we don't need more roads anymore. However, we tell that first of all, not all of them have high-speed roads, which cut travel time to 16 hours. And second of all, what about the poorest 4% of Chinese provinces that do not have any roads? Our opponents are not even helping the poorest people in China. Fourthly, we tell that we can help poor people by remittance. ResearchGate 2008 writes that in total, migrant workers remit 340 billion yuan to their families, which represents about 18% of total rural income. By increasing remittance, we alleviate poverty effectively by 18%. They said they can reduce poverty rate by 100%, but that doesn't make any sense because first of all, they cannot resettle every single rural person, and second of all, they cannot make sure that people will find jobs in urban cities. Even if we can ensure that people will find jobs, the basic income won't be enough because it costs much higher to live in urban cities. We tell that Marx 2013 explains that urbanization and resettlement has led to mass population moving to big cities and settling in informal settlements known as urban slums, which has caused suffrage of millions of migrant workers. The last clash is about welfare. We tell you that 42% of eligible urban families who are not receiving DBAL, while 86% of DBAL recipients are actually eligible. For every 10 yuan spent on DBAL, only 1 yuan goes to people in need, and 90% of the DBAL is wasted. They said they will give welfare to people after they settle to urban cities, but how can they so alleviate poverty if 90% of its spending evaporate into waste? And second of all, they said that they completely abandon DBAL and don't support DBAL. But first of all, Judge, we tell the resolution says increase spending in all welfare programs, but not abandoning DBAL. Second of all, we tell that 53 million Chinese currently receive DBAL, which means that the pro side just put 53 million people into poverty, comparing to their 16.6 million evidence. Their harms outweighs the benefits, and also they have no decent rebuttal to pension fraud, and that's why, based on these three clashes, we urge a calm ballot. Thank you.
Grand
All right,
Cross.
you go
Does
Grand
anyone?
Cross.
Okay. Just a second. Okay. Can you hear us clearly?
Can your partner also say something so I can?
We are using the same computer.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah, I can hear both of you. All right, let's start. Now, when did we ever say that we were going to abolish the DBAL program?
Okay, you never say you're gonna abolish the DBAL program. Simply just not increasing spending and let it waste money like because of mistargeting and misallocation. It's like harming the poor, right? Because
exactly
53 million
people.
Okay, why? Because
Wait, I want to hear what your
finish?
partner has to say on
Can I
this
please
because
finish?
she said the number which I actually wanted to hear.
Oh, remember, it's 52%, 52 billion people, a million people are currently receiving DBAL. We're not just like
52
your
million
evidence is not
people.
15. Okay, it's just like your
Wait,
evidence is not 16.
wait. Hold on.
Can I please finish?
Hold
Can
the
I please
phone.
finish?
50. I have
Like,
a very important thing to say.
16.6 million people are living in poverty in China. That's the evidence they give us, but it doesn't say that they will be lifted out of poverty once resettlement programs are actually implemented into the system, right?
No, that is our
provide the evidence
analysis.
saying
I
that.
have a question for you, and I'd like you to stop talking because you're literally badgering us. So 52 million people, if they receive DBAL, what is the requirement for receiving DBAL?
The requirement for receiving DBAL is that they have to be like the requirement DBAL is they're
Out of work.
Out of work, their income has to exceed, has to be lower than this level.
Because most of them
What is
are
the level?
incapable of working.
What is that level?
The
The
poverty line.
But
Okay,
there's only
so,
16.6 million people in poverty. You didn't
DBAL is
dispute
actually
this. It's
so
52 million
ineffective.
people. That I don't think that evidence is real. What year
Can I
is
just
this evidence
clarify and
from?
then we can just move on? Can I just clarify and we move
I'd like
on?
to know what year this evidence is from.
What year is it?
Remember, Judge, it's currently DBAL. They said they don't have to defend DBAL, but DBAL is actually a huge problem in status quo because 42% of people who actually need DBAL are not receiving DBAL. Why? Because DBAL misallocation, mistargeting, because of poverty shaming. They feel ashamed to admit that they are poor. Therefore, they don't apply for DBAL. That is why this is so problematic. That is why we have. Okay, let's move on.
Here's
You
the
try to
thing.
argue resolution, right? I'll talk about this with you. The resolution isn't on balance. The resolution isn't on balance. Welfare programs is more effective at alleviating of the poverty. It's increased spending, which means as long as we increase spending, we are topical. We do not implement all welfare programs. Also, what year is your evidence from? You simply refuse to tell us what year that 52 million evidence is from.
Okay,
Tell
we will
us
send the evidence after the crossfire, but we are wasting
great.
Just
time.
the year. Just the year, please. What year is it from?
Just the year. Just like two numbers.
We'll send you a card after crossfire. Right? So my question
All
for
right,
you:
cool.
how do you, after we have given you explicit evidence saying that resettlement and over-urbanization will lead to urban slums, how do you solve this problem by increasing?
We didn't say that they were going to lead to slums. In fact, we think that this slums isn't actually going to be a problem because the housing's already built. It's already built in ghost cities, which are not going to be slum-like.
of rural population? Does the housing cover 100% of rural population?
What do you mean rural
Does the housing
population? The
cover that?
housing's literally going to be given to these people.
No. I'm saying since you want to alleviate poverty by 100%, do the housing and the status quo currently empty, do they cover the people who are actually going to move?
Actually, this is actually a really good point. Let me talk for the last 15 seconds. Currently spending is $700 per person. We need to spend $840 per person. So that is an increase of about $2.2 billion, which is increasing spending on welfare.
I'm talking about the number of houses, okay? The number of houses.
No, you're saying increasing spending on welfare, which is our side of this debate. All right, I'd like to see that card.
Sure.
Final focus.
I'm waiting for their evidence.
Yeah, I think 1 minute
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
Our evidence is from 2017.
2017.
Yeah, it says 53 million
Let
default
me go
recipients.
to this link first. I'll start prep when I see the evidence. All right, start now. All right, that was 26 seconds. 2 minutes. I'll give a roadmap. So it's going to be an overview. Their case, it will be Hukou, remittance, slums, and then debow. And then it will be, I'll do some weighing. All right. Is anyone not ready? Time starts. Now, the fundamental thesis of our case is that welfare is a prerequisite to accessing infrastructure. What are we saying by this? We are saying that yes, building infrastructure might be great, but the key step to accessing this infrastructure is having the money to access the infrastructure to begin with. If you build a really nice road, you can't access that road unless you have a car. That is very, very self-intuitive. The fact of the matter is we need to give poor people the money to be able to access the infrastructure that they love to talk about. So let's go down their case specifically, and this is going to integrate our argument as well. So the first thing to talk about is just this idea of roads and transportation, because the thing is, increased spending is not necessary because the status quo solves. 99.6% of rural China is already covered by roads. Increasing spending by like just a tiny proportion, that is not like increasing spending by that much is not going to completely solve poverty by significant of a portion. Whereas on our side of the house, we literally have the capability to solve poverty as a whole in China. Yes, some people might not be okay with moving to urban areas. We agree that might be the case. But the fact of the matter is, when we ask these people, do you want to have food on your plate or do you want to stay in rural areas and perhaps starve to death? We think that the vast majority of people are going to choose to go to urban areas and be able to feed their families and live far better lives. If they want to go back to their traditional houses, they can during the holidays, for instance. So let's go down the major clashes. The first major clash is on the Hukou system. First, we tell you from Joe 17 that the Hukou system is already being reformed, which means this access argument that they tell you is going to disappear in the long term. But the second thing you need to realize is that 89% of those who can find jobs will find jobs, and jobs will provide you benefits. For instance, in the US, for instance, they'll provide you healthcare. In China, it's going to be similar. They're going to give you benefits. And then this idea on remittances. The thing about remittances is that this actually links into our case because we're able to decrease poverty by more, and we're able to give every single person a high quality life. The next thing to talk about is slums. These houses are in high quality areas. Slums aren't going to be a problem. But then they give you this debow argument. The fact of the matter is our argument only needs 0.4% of China's budget. We can literally times 10 the scope of our argument. We're not even going to spend 4% of China's budget. We think that even if you expand our scope, we're still going to be able to solve poverty, even if we spend a bit more.
Before prep starts, can I please see the card about how welfare is already being reformed in the status quo?
I will get that for you. I remember the evidence, but I don't have the card in my open document.
It's fine. You can take a minute.
I found it. I found it.
Oh, okay, great.
I think I found it. This is one example, but you can generalize this. I'll look for a better one. Is that the right one?
Sure, we can start the prep.
Okay.
Prep.
Okay, time's up.
Okay, anyone not ready for final focus? Before my time starts, my final focus is going to be some clarifications and straight to the voting issues. So my time starts now. First, look at some of the evidence our opponents have sent us. First of all, their evidence is about like a hookah reform is not specifically about like one place. It says that, okay, it just says that hookah reform is going to happen. It's not even reform. It simply says that the migrants are allowed to receive education in the short run. It doesn't reform. Okay, so they still don't have hookah. They're just allowed to receive education. About like pension benefits, unemployment benefits, about like the healthcare benefits, they cannot access it still because there is no hookah, and they cannot generalize the action of one province or like one city as the entire population, as the entire nation. So they should not be credited to their side. And also they tell you that the end result in today's debate is that they think that they can lift 16.6 million people out of poverty, but that doesn't happen because they have no empirical evidence to show that this will happen. Their only evidence to show is that 16.6 million people are living in poverty in China currently. It doesn't mean that they will pull them out of poverty. They have no empirical evidence to show that will happen in the future after increased spending. And also, moving on to the only contention, they dropped four of our offenses and never touched them. For example, when we say that if they want to move the entire population to the urban cities, simply leave the abandoned land and barren and unpopulated, somehow the overcrowding will force them to move back to the rural areas, and rural areas have to be developed again, and that costs even more. And two, they're already empty houses, so they're distributed to poor. So why increase spending, right? It's already enough. The houses are enough, therefore there's no reason to increase spending. And also, when they talk about like they can find jobs and it's not sweatshops, remember, Judge, even though urban jobs pay more than rural jobs, the cost of living is higher as well. They have never responded to this, never touched on our link. We said that they cannot prove the ratio actually is the ratio is bigger or smaller, therefore they do not access their impacts. Also, the only evidence they give us is about how like migrant workers earn average of 3,962 yuan per month. That doesn't work because, Judge, remember, it's migrant workers. It also includes the con-side, which also leads to this outcome, which by providing transportation. So in the end of this debate, remember, Judge, that they cannot defend. You have a reason to not vote for pro, but to not vote for con, but you have no reason to vote for pro. But in the end, when we compare the impact and feasibility, we actually do win even on impact comparison. So we urge a con ballot.
Actually, may I see one of the card? I kind of want to see one of the pro team's card, but I already made the decision, so yeah, I already made.
Sure. Which one is it?
Yeah, may I see your 89% of people found job?
89%. Wait, let me get you the article because we kind of
Okay,
have the
thank you.
shortened version in our
Yeah,
case.
I already made the decision, so don't worry about it.
Right. 89%. Which one was this? All right, I'll find you the link because
Thank
I
you.
know which one it is. 89%. Do you want the quote?
Oh, it's better with the link. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll send the quote and then the chat. I'll send the quote in the chat and the link will be in the subsequent message.
Okay, thank you.
So we already have the results. And this is a 5-0 ballot, which means all of the judges vote for pro there. So all of the judges vote for pro. Yeah, so pro wins in this debate round. Yeah, I could see how pro first speaker is excited about the result. And the judge will give our feedback right now.
Should we give comments or is this just over?
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I have some homework I have to do. I haven't started, so I need to go do some work.
Yeah, I'll wait for a comment.
If you have feedback, I can listen to it, but like I have a lot of stuff I have to do.
All right, yeah, sure. If,
Andrew, if you're busy, I can record it for you.
Yeah.
anytime if you need to leave, please leave. I take
Yeah.
offense. Yep. All right, I'll
All
just
right,
start.
I'm gonna leave the room now. Bye.
Bye,
All right. I'll briefly comment this round. Actually, like I think, like for me personally, I was like the entire pro case. I think the reason for vote is very obvious. Just one plan. That pro has its plan and con did not attack it too successfully, and essentially, pro kind of just stands. So the reason for vote is very obvious. But for me, like whether for me to buy this plan, like at all, is kind of just. Well, in between, it's kind of just in between. It's really like on the border of me buying it at all. So yeah, for me, it's still a very close round, but kind of in a different perspective. So yeah, as long as I buy the pro plan, they win the debate. If I don't, they lose. So yeah, essentially like that. But yeah, I will talk a little bit about the pro plan, which I am personally not too happy about. I have to be honest. So several things that I have to talk about. First is that this is a rather drastic plan. You have to know that a total relocation of population from the rural areas to the urban areas is an extremely drastic plan, and a lot of cost is simply not considered by the pro. Well, pro probably don't want to bring this up, but I think con really need to bring a lot of potential costs that they need to think about, and the cost is simply far beyond just financial reasons. It's far more about the practical issues, about whether the people want to live at all, or want to leave their original living place at all. So I think for the pro side, no matter if you do want to actively bring up the cost by yourself, you do need to realize that this is an extremely drastic plan. And in order to bring up such a drastic plan, you need to have some type of poverty scheme analysis. And in this case, probably especially on geography, on geographical reasons. For some specific villages are trapped specifically by geographical reasons, you need to propose a necessity, the absolute necessity of such a drastic plan. And yeah, so you also kind of need some proof of potential and feasibility. So previously, I judged another team, I think from ISB, they have almost the entire same case. So actually, in their case, I think they have some plan. They do have some evidence to address like some of the previous attempts on the relocation program, whether they are big or small. I think you kind of need to do the same thing to at least show some of the actual practical potential. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, personally, I'm also not quite satisfied with the 90% or 89% 89% employment statistic. Why am I not too happy with that? I think the main reason, first of all, is that this 90%, if you think about it, it seems like a high number, but if you look at it reversely, it also means 10% unemployment, which is also kind of a unacceptably high standard as an unemployment rate. This is the first thing. The second thing is that this employment, at least from the card that you just sent, it means that for each household, at least one person get a job. Well, we know that each household will usually have at least 3 people. Usually, probably in a lot of situations, probably we will expect ideally at least 2 of them to have a job. And second, know that this job does not account for whether this job, it does not account for the specific salary or pay. Also does not account to whether this is a full-time or a part-time job. It has nothing to say about these potentials. So what I essentially will look for a little bit more from the pro case is more analysis, more at least micro level, on the individual level of analysis on how much each individual from the rural area is better. So the only justification for this entire drastic relocation plan is that, well, the city areas in general, they are richer than the poor. Their average living wage is 4,000 RMB. I think this is from their case, which, well, this is only a general situation. This does not account from the case-by-case basis. Also, specifically, also does not mean that every single one living in the city areas will live much richer in the rural areas. It also does not mean that a rural person, after he relocates into an urban area, he will just become richer. It also says nothing about that. So also from this micro level data, I also find it to be quite insufficient. And one final thing that I'm not specifically happy about is that while you do have this very, very bold and brave case, is that I think you did not utilize that very well in the later part of the speech, especially in rebuttal and final focus. So in rebuttal and final focus, in rebuttal, you try to respond to a lot of your opponent's point, but I think you're relatively going on a rather conservative method to respond one by line without mentioning any of your own case. But your entire stance is that we don't care about DBAL. We don't care about any other type of welfare program. We can just abandon them. We only go for this relocation plan. But you kind of just leave some backward for you, which kind of just, well, in some sense, lessens the strength of your case. And also the same for your final focus. In your final focus, you first mentioned that welfare should serve as a prerequisite to infrastructure, which itself is unbacked by any specific type of evidence. And second, you mentioned about the hukou, which is an extremely technical difficulty that does not speak to any specific reason for vote. So that's kind of the reason why I'm not specifically happy and was hesitating for a very long time whether for me to buy the pro case or not. But as the con side did not specifically give me any reasons why this is any infeasible plan, I try not to argue for con. But this also kind of is on the border of common sense for me. I understand like this is simply practically just unfeasible, but still I try not to argue for con. So essentially I feel I have to buy pro, and con, as to the con, their essential an offense is on the transportation, which is kind of mitigated by the pro, because, well, most of the villages are already covered by roads, and con did not bring up any further issues like we need some further infrastructure. Also did not bring up the maintenance costs or any other thing. So because they did not expand on that, I feel also hard to argue for the con side for that. So I have to say this is not really so much of a voluntary vote. I do not want to vote for pro because I think they have a lot of problems with it, but this is not a happy vote for me. But still, I mean, I don't mean that I'm angry at any debater. I think this is a very bold attempt, but just like I will expect much more from this plan. So.
Thank you, Judge Kevin. That was very comprehensive, and then you just said pretty much everything we want to say. So I guess something that I want to add on to is just like I really bought the argument where pro mentioned all our arguments actually prerequisites for the cons proposal, and I feel like that's a very strategic thing to say in summary speech, and then it actually got elaborated on in final focus where the second speaker said, even if you want to build a role for infrastructure, then those people have to get like financial support to even get some cars to like drive on the roads. That I feel like it's just fulfilling what you were saying back in your summary speech, that your arguments are actually the prerequisites. So that's the reason why I voted for pro.
Yeah, and I also voted for pro. So basically, Gavin and Sakura basically included what all of this debate had been. And I think that basically, I think the second speaker from pro side did a really great impact bringing for all of the questions and voting issues. And they have a better mind and outline of the whole debate. And also, I think the concept that you are mentioning job question points, and since there are more statistics and data you could use on this, and gives more clarity and words to explain this, instead of just like mentioning 2 or 3 sentences in your summary speech and final focus. And also, like, I understand that when you say that I have 10 responses in a rebuttal speech, I was literally shocked because of like most of the people will structure their rebuttal speech kind of like point to point rebuttal to pro side. So I understand that why you did this, but I think that it would be better if you do point to point rebuttal because of like to let the judge and the whole audiences or whatever to know that which point they are you rebuttal. So basically, this is the final that I was expected, and it is great. And I think that both summary speech could improve a little bit, and compared with summary speech, I think content did a better job. But at the end, pro gave me a back, so that's why.
Okay, I think other judges have basically covered everything I want to say. I just have some like individual feedback to both sides. Starting from the pro side, I think that it's a good strategy to say that problems with welfare system carry smaller impact compared with the impact that you brought up with that case. But we're talking about the increased spending on this case. And I feel like it's also important to consider and compare the marginal benefits generated by the same amount of money in both welfare and infrastructure system. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And as for the con side, I feel like you made some really good points in your rebuttal and crossfire. For example, you said that migrants from cities are different from settlers from rural areas, and therefore like they're facing very different situations. But you only brought it up in the rebuttal and like crossfire speech, so I feel like you may need to elaborate on that. And this could be a good point as for your counter argument toward their strategy. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, I also voted for the pro, definitely. I mean, I think so. The first judge has summed it up really well. Like, I also voted for the pro side because of their asset-based welfare program, and they stated that it's 100% poverty alleviation program, although the infeasibility issues could have been targeted by the con side, and also they also said it's much more cost efficient. It just takes like 0.4%, so it also convinced me that if the con side is not targeting it might be the cost efficient solution. And also like the pro side countered the con argument about the physical infrastructure about the transport by saying that the 99% of the roads already exist. So that make me vote for the pro side. So that's my reason for voting for the pro. Thank you.
Thank you.